Hey, Friday night is with us again. 'Tis 9 o'clock, and it's time for Conversations with the Owl, whoever he is.
Yeah, whoever that guy is. I'm Mike McGraner, your host, and with, of course, the man of the hour, Fritz The Nite Owl, and co-host Vidas Barzdukas. And with us always is Christian. So we have a treat tonight. I know we teased it a couple episodes ago or whatever, but as we are deep in the 50th anniversary now, a lot of you have asked about what's the episode guide? What are the episodes you've made? What are the episodes you've done? Well, I can tell you from the season sets, the season 1 set's already out. The season 2 set is my fault. It's still coming out very, very soon, like within weeks. But I'm getting the artwork done now, and then we should be good. But that first couple of seasons was a special time where we first rebooted the show, and we had an effects guy that kind of was a part of the team and kicked it off with us, and that's Tobias Rediger, and he is with us today on the episode. Say hello, Tobias.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. It's good to reunite with everyone after
to see you
10
again.
years.
Yeah, it has been over 10 years since we've seen Tobias, so this is pretty amazing. And Tobias started at House on Haunted Hill, which was our 4th episode, and all the way through Back to the Future.
That goes all the way back to 2010.
So January 2011 through November 2013. So yeah, it's weird. It's only 3 years. But man, I mean, at that time we were hitting it hard every month. There was never a month off. We took a small break between seasons, but how were you approached about? I know I was the one who approached you, but I'm kind of like had you seen a show like this in your local town growing up?
No.
Okay.
No, and in fact, when you first talked to me about it, I had not seen, Nite Owl growing up. I didn't know what it was, and you basically had to walk me through it and say, here's what it was. But yeah, I had never seen a show like it.
And where are you based out of, like your original city that you're from?
I mean, I grew up all over the place. Right?
Oh, okay.
So, we moved around extensively.
We know like Cleveland had like Goulardi and
Big Chuck and Little John.
Dad, stuff like that. So, it was a pretty neat time. But yeah, so I was happy you came on board. Without going into too much detail, it was a time where we really needed an effects guy, and we had launched, and this thing was huge, and we were like, uh-oh, we need something, and I was happy for you to fill in for 2 years.
Yeah, when you first approached me, you're like, we probably need someone for a couple episodes, and I was like, I can probably swing that.
So why did you ask Tobias? Did you see his work on other things, or?
My guess is like.
Do you remember?
Well, I remember going to these mixers where a lot of like people that it was like half people that worked in film, half people that just wanted to go hang out to talk to people.
Right.
And so it was one of these things where I'm just kind of like trying to figure out like, well, who to team up with, and there was something about your personality that meshed. Same thing with you. Like actually, the two of you remind me of very similar personalities. Where like. I know.
I'm sorry, Tobias.
But there's just this level of professionalism in the way that you present yourselves, and but not even that we're like super professional, but it's just there are people that talk and people that do, and you guys just seem like that you're passionate about what you're doing.
Oh, thanks.
And the good thing is you're both kind of businessmen too. I mean, you're like independent contractors and things, and that's important. And an important aspect of selling a show too is like, yes, we want to be passionate about it, but we also want to say, does this look great for the presentation we're putting on? And I think that's why I approached you about it. It was just like,
well, I think we were somewhat familiar with each other's work through like 48-hour film project stuff and other projects that had gone on before that. So we kind of knew who each other were, and I think we had talked about maybe doing something together in the future.
That's what it was.
It just never happened. And then I was obviously doing effects kind of stuff for commercials and whatever, and you knew that. So I think that was probably where the call came from. Though it's hard to piece together,
No, it really might have been the fact, and I don't mean to sound bad saying this, but it really might have been the fact that like you did effects and I didn't know anyone that did effects, but at the same time knew you did like
I have one number to call,
right? And knew you did bigger like corporate projects and things, and so for me it was like, well, maybe he'd enjoy playing, which is. Less of a you're in this box and more of like you're in this playground.
Yep.
So that was a fun thing to do. And I know like we all came up with the effects together of like what we're going to do with Fritz. I remember you and I watching Freaks, like a print of it, a 35 millimeter print of it, going, here's where we're going to go to break and here's what we're going to do. And I was so, I think, a team player when I felt weird being the boss of this thing when no one was really getting paid. And that's the truth is I'm like, I can't just say, we're going to do this. I wanted a teammate to say, sure, let's do this, because it just didn't feel right other than I wanted to like control what we showed and the way the final output was, but it wasn't, you know. Yeah. I still to this day, if I was left to do effects, I have no, like, I'm not interested in that. Like it's more of like, I believe like I'm good at this and this, and I don't want to learn other things. Sure. And I know you're the opposite of more of like, well, screw it, we're going to tackle this. I'll figure out how to do it later, you know? Yeah. And I think that's, I'm just not, I'm like a stay in your box kind of guy where let the professionals handle it. So yeah, so going into this.
Yeah, I think there was a big evolution though, because when I came on in episode 4, because I didn't have any framework for this, you provided a lot of guidance about like where those breaks should be, what kind of things you were looking for. And then over time, we started to get, you know, kind of more and more comfortable with, kind of comfortable with iterating together and collaborating and kind of coming up with them together. And, you know, I think that just evolved naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. Are we good?
Yeah. Oh,
Christian?
yeah.
Oh, yeah. We got Christian over there, the mad scientist, is like beating on things, and we're like, "What's going on? You all right?"
Yeah, we're all good.
You did press record, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna Memorex this live moment, right? but yeah, no, that was and you did see like, so our first 3 episodes, I know you were the one that taught me why we should shoot in HD, because this is literally the beginning of that. Consumer cameras were leaving SD, going to HD, but all the professionals were ahead of the game. And I was just like, but I want it to look like it did on TV.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And I was so set. I mean, I look back on those 2 years and I'm like, there were so many times where I frustrated you just professionally, but like I look at it now going, I understand why, just because of everything I've learned since then.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, geez, like I really should have learned to just trust. And I was so too much of a control freak. But we shot our first 3 episodes in standard def 60i, which was like, you know, news broadcast standards at the time. And House on Haunted Hill, we started shooting in HD. And it made the effects a lot easier to do because you could then shrink it down to SD and go, cool, we're going to, you know, less edge lines and things. So that was a lot of fun.
And wasn't House on Haunted Hill the first time we went to more than 3 breaks?
Yes, that was the other thing is I know we were kind of set on doing it like it was on Channel 10.
Like it was on Channel 10, but,
which was intro, outro, mid-break.
The voiceover things just didn't work in the theater.
Yeah, people were just mad. They were like, we came here to see Fritz and we're not seeing Fritz. So House on Haunted Hill was our first time where we went to 5 breaks with 2 off screen. And we kept that format all the way to Metropolis, which was all 7 on screen.
So when you did that, when you did the stuff early on, what was on screen when Fritz was talking?
Oh, it was just a graphic.
Oh, just a graphic.
It was Nite Owl graphic.
It was the Nite Owl.
Just like how it was on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were like, you know, buy a T-shirt, and I mean, it was more like a product placement kind of thing, and it just felt it. We're like, well, if he's going to talk, we may as well see him in an effect.
It was the artwork by Rome. It was the artwork by Rome Maynard, which was the Nite Owl symbol on a black T-shirt.
Yeah,
and Rome Maynard did the artwork for that. And that was what we did. The voiceovers. The voiceovers worked great on Channel 10, but in the theater they just were.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't.
When will this be over?
Right. Well, people didn't cheer; they were learning things, but it was like we're just hearing this. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know, and we also had commercials then, like actual TV commercials. And the reason I've dropped those from the Blu-ray releases and everything is because it's like
it's a rights issue.
Well, I just pulled them off YouTube. We didn't have the rights to that. Sure. So I was just like, here's these random commercials for Colgate and things that probably still exist.
So then, so Tobias, so when Mike approached you, were you like the first person? How did those effects come together? Were they your ideas or were they Tobias's first ideas?
I think we both watched the movie together.
I think it was my idea, and you guys would elaborate on them. Because I remember in House on Haunted Hill, one of the breaks, I went into a room.
Yeah,
and
your head came back, and we went inside the house.
Yeah,
and you walked into a room, and that was like
and
we
disappeared.
hadn't done anything like that.
Yeah,
it was just you standing in front of things, or you popping up here. But that was something where, Tobias cut the door frame out, and you passed through the door, and I mean, it was definitely a step up.
Yeah,
from what we were doing, and
they were really collaborative.
Yeah,
things on the effects as to.
Before Jaws, where I was like, "We're doing this."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, it's just
we get big movies now.
Right.
It's just a thing that we found out that doing more live works was more work, but on the other hand, it worked infinitely better in the theaters.
Yeah,
than it did on
really
TV.
Well. And House on Haunted Hill. So the thing about our first 2 seasons is that's one of those movies that was so good on its own that we were able to, everything worked together hand in hand. But a lot of the movies were tough. I mean, we had like Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, and even Freaks, like it's a cult status, but the sound is real bad in the print. I mean, there's never been a good sound for that movie because it's just 1932. They didn't restore it well, and it's even on Criterion now, and it still sounds rough. But it's there's something about the frequency of sound. Not to get too nerdy, but when you're hearing like an old movie and like the popping and cracking, and you're hearing just a bad sound, when it kind of lulls you into a sleep.
Sure,
and the pacing's not that fast. And I feel like some of the movies, it's just you're in that halfway between sleep and awake mode, and so when Fritz would come on, you'd kind of wake up for it.
Yeah.
But House on Haunted Hill was not one of those. That was a good one.
As I remember, the first year was all black and white.
Well, it's just whatever we had available. So, like Santa Claus was.
I think
color.
Santa Claus was the first one we did in color.
I think so.
Well, there were 2 black and whites, then color, then black and white, black and white, black and white, black and white, black and white. Color was the Terror, was the second color one, and then black and white, black and white, black and white.
First year,
yeah, episode 9.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now that so the season 1 set's already out. Season 2 says coming out in a couple weeks or whatever, and it was going back through these was fun to watch. I went back to the original files you gave me and upscaled them, and it just was able to. I went even back to the original projects and tried to see if like you had any that were like full HD before the exports that I could re-export, and unfortunately they weren't. But it was fun to be able to like deinterlace them now and everything, because at the time it's just I remember you going, you want this, okay, and you could see the wiggle, and like if he's wearing a shirt like that, it's just like crazy,
right?
But on the Blu-rays now that I like cleaned up, I mean I just took flicker removal, and just basically like it doesn't happen anymore.
Sure,
yeah,
they look great.
For the folks at home, Fritz is wearing a striped shirt.
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm just pointing. This is not a video, a visual podcast.
For his shirt over there.
Right. Yeah, just really people in the
pinstripes on interlaced footage tend to jitter quite a bit. So.
Yeah. So we kicked it off with Night of the Living Dead. That was with a different effects artist. And then we went to Plan 9. Those were the 2 biggest. And Joe Bob Briggs was kind enough to help me kind of like give me titles that were public domain that we could kind of use for a thing. So Night of the Living Dead and Plan 9 was my way of going like, okay, if this doesn't land, if this doesn't work, then we just did the 2 most popular public domain movies of all time. And then Christmas happened, and Santa Claus Conquers the Martians was the only public domain really. There was that and a Spanish movie called Santa Claus, which is like Santa Claus battling a demon. It's really cool, but I'm like, Martians is more popular, and it's just so bad. But once those 3 were done, Tobias came in, and so House on Haunted Hill, then we did Freaks and Carnival of Souls, which is just a really haunting, cool kind of movie shot in Kansas City. And then the Reefer Madness, Dementia 13, The Terror, which is Roger Corman, who just passed, sadly. Teenagers from Outer Space, The Phantom Planet, and then I knew we wanted to end with Metropolis for our first season. And that movie is Rome Maynard, one of our writers on that. Well, he wrote Metropolis, that episode, but that's his favorite movie of all time, and just super iconic. And I know you had seen that already before, right? I mean, you had seen Metropolis?
No, it was my first time. Yeah.
Yeah, and that movie visually is just like one of the best public domain films. And so when we got to Metropolis, I remember putting all 7 breaks on camera because we were like, this movie's so gorgeous that there's so much stuff you can do. And I think that's when we first met Ryan Blazo, was he came in to rotoscope death.
Yeah, I think so.
I think.
Yeah, because he had been working for me doing some like work on some commercial work, and I knew that we just needed extra help.
Yeah,
and so kind of like brought him in to help with that.
Yeah, and that
was a undertaking and a half.
Yeah, frame by frame rotoscope of death, raising the scythe. And, oh my gosh, almost knocked the mic over. That's what happens when you do it live. But raising the scythe and cutting Fritz in half was all frame by frame lifted from the movie and put out in front, and that was a really cool effect. But yeah, that movie's great. Yeah. It's gorgeous. That's why we did it in both twice. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think thinking back over that first season, kind of getting started with some of those lower definition black and white films actually like saved us, right? Because like we could cheat so much
in black and white,
a lot of these things, and especially like lower definition with like poor prints. Like we could get away with murder on the effects where when we started doing higher definition things, like you had to be real precise. And so we were able to move faster and just do fun things that kind of looked a little cheesy, but it felt like it fit in with the movie.
Right.
Well, that was like kind of the nice piece about starting there.
Yeah, that was the challenge I think you had, was making it not perfect enough to be too good, but then also like kind of having to be a bit cheesy, but then adding the grain to fit with like just it had to look like the print. Yep. And I imagine that was the hardest, like more challenging than like almost like you have to downgrade something in order to get it to mix right. I don't know if that's if we were doing that early on, but
no, we were. I mean, I think it was a process that I had done before, so it wasn't. I knew what to do, right? And I knew that it needed to be done, because if you just put, even just color corrected Fritz to be black and white and threw him in onto one of those prints, it would look terrible. Because
he would stand.
He would be like sharp and pristine, and then the footage is all kind of like a little blurry, a little soft, a little grainy. Yep. And so just matching that. But that wasn't difficult, right? The hard things were actually cutting the film apart and, allowing him to interact with pieces of that. That was the most time consuming piece.
So as somebody who knows nothing about this stuff, like how it's done, like how much time would it take you to do like some of these effects that we're talking about?
I think the answer is probably too much.
No. I'm just curious, because for me, you just press a button on a computer, it's like, but I know it's not that easy.
Look, this was the days before generative AI, so it was a little bit more challenging. No, I mean there were effects that it would be 10 hours on.
Okay,
and there were others that it would be a couple. But some of it you wouldn't fully know until you had run it, exported it, and then kind of like watched it back to be like, no, I need to tweak some stuff there, or in context it doesn't really look right. But the simple ones were when we would do kind of like a mouth replacement, right? We would have a person and then have like Fritz's lips like talking on their face. Those are easy. You cut a hole in the thing, you kind of create like a soft edge to it so that it blends together. That's pretty easy. As long as Fritz isn't moving his head around crazy and he's staying still, it's easy enough.
Yeah.
The really complicated ones were where he had to like move into a scene and interact with anything that was moving.
Okay.
And so those were or like we would do reveals where, somebody would, pull a lid off of something and he would be there. His head would be like on the plate or whatever.
That's Spider Baby, our season 2 opener. Yeah.
And so at that point, you're actually cutting like pieces of the footage apart, placing him in between it. But then you also have to like replace pieces of the background. And so a lot of that's going frame by frame. And so a lot of this stuff was shot at 24 frames a second. So if, the shot's 4 seconds long, 4 times 24, and you're like cutting that out,
right.
Entire thing frame by frame, and then kind of like making sure that it looks good played back full speed. So you're like cutting apart, it's called masking, and then putting Fritz in there, color correcting him, adding the grain, adding whatever, jitter or any effects that need to be on there, and then putting it all back together. And so that would be the time consuming part.
So if you like pull a lid off of it, his like head's on the plate, every frame that you would see his head would be a frame by frame rotoscope.
Mike is slowly lifting up his arm as he's acting out.
For all of you watching.
Yeah.
Probably
For
you
all
watching at home.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm just explaining it to Vidas.
it's 2 questions. So, like, which would you say would have been your most frustrating effect? You have one, and then do you have one that you're the most proud of? That every time you see it, you're like, that kicked the.
First of all, do you remember these? Because they're like 13 years
So
ago.
I remember some of them.
Okay.
I mean, I just pulled the Spider Baby one out like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
No, I think the one that I have that I'm most proud of is probably in Charade in season 2. In part because, and we can get to that a little later, and I don't want to spoil a surprise too much. But I think that's probably the one I'm most proud of. I think we had a lot that were challenging early on because, we were kind of making a lot of this stuff up. And so, Fritz, Mike, myself, one of us would kind of come up with an effect. We would watch the movie. Sometimes Mike had watched it through and had an idea for what he wanted. And then we would have to go kind of shoot it. And whatever we shot would have to work.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And so there were times that, we really wanted, a kind of somebody to walk in front of Fritz, or we wanted, and, if we didn't, I think the hardest ones there were where we didn't have kind of a long enough clip of the live action piece. And so we would get this tiny little bit of live action, and then the person would just like freeze because that's where the clip cut.
Okay.
And so those were always a little frustrating for me, not because it was hard to do, but just because I felt like the production value wasn't as high as it could have been if we had had a longer clip of full action.
Yeah, I remember so many times where like, if only that shot was a second longer.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure.
She would clear the frame or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, a lot of the things you came up with were way ahead of what was happening in television and in feature films. Some of the effects you had on there were ahead. Like a lot of them are common now, but you were maybe 3 years ahead of what the big commercial people with all the money were doing, and that was, I think, one of the things that made the show so people would come back, because you did things that had never been seen before on TV.
Well, and even if it wasn't so much being ahead as the fact that for your regular job, you did high budget things. So you were able to then go, okay, well, this is what they're doing currently, and these things.
Right.
So this is like a walk in the park, but also like, do it well enough to where you can have that comparison instead of.
So when I was first kind of getting started, I was running an advertising agency, but I was super interested in film stuff. And so I had taken a whole bunch of online classes with this group. And all they did was like teach like film visual effects and editing techniques. And they were taught by people straight out of Hollywood, right? So like I took a class by this, from this guy named Mark Christensen, who had actually done work on like, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right? And he had done work on like
the Masterclass series?
The Island. No, it was a different.
Okay.
It was a different one. Gotcha. It was like predates Masterclass stuff. It's called FX PhD, but so I got to learn like these like big budget techniques from people who, and we did stuff with big budget red footage green screen, so like 4K cinema quality green screen stuff. So I was used to and had some exposure working on like really interesting kind of innovative visual effects work aimed at film. And so when we started doing this, I just pulled out of a lot of bags of tricks that I had learned and kind of techniques that I was aware of, which made it like a fun playtime. It was like what you were saying at the beginning.
Did it ever work vice versa, where the stuff you learned on Nite Owl you're able to apply towards your job?
You can say no.
No. That's cool. No, I think it all kind of like goes hand in hand, right? Like you're always learning something, and sometimes those things are just about speed.
Sure.
And it's about kind of mental flexibility and kind of collaboration. And those are equally as important as anything around a certain technique or a certain tool.
Okay.
Well, and one thing I liked about you is you weren't lazy at all. I mean, like literally, like there's so many breaks we could have like finished a few days early. Like when they, if they did pull a tray off something, it's like, well, the first couple frames might be a little weird if you were to pause it and go frame by frame. But you had seen that stuff and go, wait, I'm going to fix these. And I think that's what was neat about it. And now that
was a level of professionalism too.
Oh, just that OCD of, I mean, that's what I am too, is like it has to be perfect. But what this show taught me was how to do it with a deadline.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this is why my new album that comes out next year, I've been working on for 5 years.
Sure. Right.
There's no deadline.
Right.
Like,
Sure.
you give yourself a deadline. It's awesome. You're just like, okay, well, But yeah, no, I think that was what made this so fun, is just having that. But yeah, our second season was Spider Baby, Hercules, The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, and The Bat with Vincent Price. So 1-2 punch. Nightmare Castle with Barbara Steele, Horror Express, one of my favorites with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, Charade, which we'll get back to because that episode is really special. The Street Fighter's Last Revenge with Sonny Chiba. We did brought back Double Chiller for that season, and we did Horror Hotel and the Satanic Rites of Dracula. And then The Little Shop of Horrors, Roger Corman, and we wanted to end with Fritz Lang again, so we did the English version of M. And that was our second season. And this is the year people are focused on that season because we never finished releasing it on DVDs at the time, but like the set's finally coming out this year. So it's like last year was season 1, this year season 2, and as we kind of wrap everything up, it's nice to have it more preserved now instead of just sitting on a hard drive. I'm like, oh, cool, this is something we can get, just look back on. So I've been getting real nostalgic, kind of looking back at all this stuff and going, man, I can't believe it's been 12 years since we, or whatever, because it seems like yesterday. I mean, it seems really. As much as we've all done with our lives, it still seems not too far away. And so it is weird. The older you get, faster time goes, and all of this is just, But Charade, that's an example of a public domain film that was almost too good. Like I wish I would have almost picked that movie to be part of our newer stuff that we're doing because it's just that good. And boy, did we go all out. Tobias directed that episode. And we went all out on each break. It was really just
every break was a winner on that. But like I say, the lighting and interacting dialogue with Audrey Hepburn was something that he came up with,
which got Fritz's first Emmy for the series, for the reboot series.
Well, and again, you rarely saw that in feature films or local television.
Yeah,
and that was one of the things that he did have made the show unlike any other local TV show going on.
Well, and I remember, and that was absolutely 100% Tobias when he's like, I want him to light her cigarette.
Is that the shot that you were the most proud of? That one shot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's where Fritz like lights Audrey Hepburn's cigarette. And I remember when we were watching it in kind of pre-production, looking for where we could have breaks, I was like, that's the one. And we timed it. And
we had to time the silence between.
We could time the silence. And there was like this cadence as they were talking back and forth in the original film. And I was like, I think there's enough space in here that we can write Fritz's dialogue to fit those pieces.
So were you the one that came up with that idea?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he also had Fritz blow out the match.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the shit that I never would have looked at and been like, let's do that too.
Right,
right. It was really awesome.
Okay.
Great episode.
Yeah, I feel like that's about the time that we were all really, because season 1 we were kind of figuring a bunch of stuff out. We were testing a bunch of new techniques. And at some point in season 2, we were really hitting on all cylinders. We were watching more.
Wish we had better movies.
We were watching more of these things together and doing more, pre-production meetings and really figuring out what those breaks were going to look like and thinking bigger about them. And I feel like Charade was the one where we were just like, oh, and this is the movie where we can really up everything because the movie's good enough to handle it, right?
Well, and you were pretty instrumental in pulling me out of the way that the show used to be and into what we can do to make it, to bring it more into the modern.
Like how so?
The things we can do. Like with season 2, it was just something where I think, I may be making this up, but I think you told me one time, why do another season unless we can up? You never want to go backward or stay where you're at.
Yeah, never plateau, right?
Yeah, never plateau. And so season 2, it just, the movies we had weren't the best movies, but it was like, there were like Horror Express was great and The Last Man on Earth was great. There are those gems in there, but I think you can cherry pick movies out of season 2, kick the 3 not so great movies out of season 1 and build a perfect season with those public domain movies.
Yep.
And Charade was just, I could watch that over and over and over. That movie's best movie Hitchcock never directed. It was Stanley Donen, but it feels like a Hitchcock.
Well, it was surprising that it was in the public domain area somewhere along the line. Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn, and names below the title were James Coburn and Walter Matthau
George
were
Kennedy.
Supporting actors in it, and just everything. Our breaks and the movie were A+.
Yeah, I kind of want to bring that back and show it again this year, like for the 50th, and just, we haven't showed any of our first 2 seasons, but I think
Is it still public domain?
Yeah, well, it is, but when we did these movies, they were all public domain. I know there are gray areas now because things have been not reclaimed, but there's just different laws on it, I think, now, like where things are getting like...
What's the status of Metropolis? No.
Well, Metropolis is public domain now. But the thing you got to watch out for are the public domain things are what print you're using. If it's been cleaned up, that's a new copyright by a company. It's a really weird thing. And at this level, we're a regional show. We're not unloading these things by the thousands. So I think it's something where it's just like, I'm going off the list that I had when we did the series, and if things have changed, I certainly don't know where it stands now.
Sure.
I'm sure we'll find out.
Yeah, but we always had good crowds.
It's all about preserving the breaks.
Sure.
Yeah, we always had good crowds the first and second year when we were doing the public domain things.
Except for Hercules and Charade.
Only, well, as they say, Hercules, Charade, and
Santa Claus.
The Santa Claus Conquers the Martian was either on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve.
It was Christmas Day that night.
And we had about 10 people. We had about 10.
I wasn't even there for it. Yeah. I was calling Fritz, like, how's it going?
Yeah,
like,
we had about 10 people there for that.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before,
could have been 11.
I didn't even want to be there for that.
Right.
It's like, screw this movie.
Well, as I say, in the first 2 years, as I've mentioned before, I only picked 2 movies, and both of them bombed as far as audience attendance.
Listen, Charade though.
Why did that?
Every time we've showed Charade, we cannot get more than 20 people there.
Just because it's an older movie,
I think people just don't know
about
how good
it.
this damn. We need to do it at the Ohio Theater. That's an Ohio Theater movie. It's that good. And I'll be mentioning that to Rich Corsi over at Kappa sometime soon.
Right.
Who we love, who's given us a chance every year to show stuff.
I think the music, there was a song in Charade, I think that won the Oscar for best.
Yeah, the song Charade, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. It was a popular hit.
It's the only thing not public domain.
Oh.
It's weird. It's like the song still had to get, there's a whole.
Right.
Yeah, no, as I was saying, I was just surprised that movie accidentally fell into public domain.
Universal picture. It's so weird, but it's still on every public domain.
Right.
And it's a timeless movie. You can watch it today, and it's as good as it was when it first came out.
I mean, if we show it again, I'm definitely calling Universal and being like, "What do we owe you for this? What do we do?" Because it's just, it's so good. Yeah. So, anyway, but yes. So, but working on Nite Owl Theatre for the 2 years you were here, I know that at the end of season 2, we sort of we had that weird, because we did Trick or Treat after the Street Fighter's Last Revenge, and it was sort of like with 4 episodes of season 2 left to go, we did Trick or Treat because Michael Dougherty was in town, and he and I collaborated on that movie, and I know that that episode changed everything because we sold it out, and it was like we took our crowd from half full to just packed house. And I think that was the moment where, you and I think Tobias had talked to Eric Brembeck at Studio 35 about, why don't you guys do these bigger movies? And I'm like, well, because he and I had talked about, during effects sessions, just God, I wish we had better movies.
So what did Eric say to you?
Well, it was just we talked about it. I guess, yeah.
What did Eric say to you?
Well, I think he kind of backed up what I had been saying.
Okay,
which was, you should do bigger movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because he's like, I'll book them, it'll be fine. And we're like, well, but we had to, that's what it was. We couldn't release it on home media. And so we were like, well, we can no longer sell DVDs of our stuff at the shows for merch. But then I think at that point, this is a horrible business model, but it's like, this was never about making money.
Well,
it was just like, if we can put Fritz in Jaws.
No, right. Yeah.
Like, hell yeah. I don't care if we have a t-shirt.
So how did you feel about us doing Jaws?
What do you mean?
He was on it. So he was like,
were you happy with all the movies? Were you excited about?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that I was, the only ones that I wasn't too familiar with were actually in season 1 and part of season 2, where they were really old things that I had just never seen. I had never seen Reefer Madness before. I had never seen Freaks before. And so this was my first viewing for a lot of these things. But yeah, I mean, once we got into some of the bigger productions, all those were interesting for me, whether I loved the movie or not, simply because a lot of them were iconic movies.
Was there pressure? Did you feel pressure? Okay, now we're entering a bigger.
My guess is you had a big grin, let's tackle this.
Yeah, I didn't feel pressure. I was just more this will be more fun.
Yeah.
More exciting.
And actual HD movies and HD footage and not having to shrink things down. And
Sure.
Well, we were already starting to, at that point, some of the movies that we were dealing with before, they had effects to some degree, practical things, but we were starting to get into movies that had other pretty modern, good visual effects. And so then you're kind of matching up what you're doing or even pulling inspiration from. So that was fun.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a new level. And it felt like hitting a new level, right? Okay, we've been doing this. And now suddenly it's and now our world has expanded.
Sure. Okay.
Well, and that audience reaction to in Jaws when he had the woman hit Fritz, slap him in the face.
Right.
But I mean, to this day, you watch that now and you're like, how the hell
did they do that?
Did you do that?
Right.
It is to the T. I mean,
I spent so much time on that effect.
I bet. I mean,
I'd kind of forgotten about that until you mentioned it.
Of all of the years we did it, that was one of the top 10 effects we ever did. I mean, you can't tell that wasn't part of the original movie.
Yeah, I don't know how the hell. I mean,
you know what's kind of fun is sitting in the audience when it goes to black. And then it fades up, and then the audience. Okay, then the audience sees.
You hear the giggles.
You hear the giggles.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's because they know Fritz is going to be there. They know there's going to be a slap. There's going to be something there.
There's anticipation.
Yeah, there's anticipation. They start giggling, and then when he actually gets slapped, it's it's funnier.
It's quite unusual, and of course, the acting in that was superb. I mean, they
you've got
they should have just mailed me the Oscar.
Right.
I mean, people have been slapped on screen before and reacted, but nothing
not like that.
Nothing like the owl did.
Well, I think it was also Tobias that said, "Put your hand up to your face afterward." When she slaps you, just ow,
right,
this kind of thing. was this nice little touch, and
Well, the only time we did,
Dreyfuss's reaction is what makes that so.
When he
funny.
winces,
He's like,
yeah.
the only time we did something similar to that was in the ending of Reanimator, where the guy throws the head, and again I have to dodge the head, and again it just worked out fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love, like, in Labyrinth, I know we're getting out of Tobias territory now, but like in Labyrinth, the end, I know you haven't seen it, Vidas, but the end break, there was 22 shot setups for that episode.
It's a lot.
Stupid. I mean, like, ridiculous. But the end break is MC Escher's all the different staircases.
Yeah.
So Bowie's here and Fritz is here, and Jennifer Connelly walks in front of the door, and Fritz parallels her behind the door. I mean, it is so intricate that it's like you swear Fritz is there on set. But it took, I mean, that shoot was like a 10.5 hour
Sure.
something stupid. And that was the one where Fritz is like, hey.
So when you were part of it, where did you guys shoot?
So we usually shot at the back lot.
Yep. For the first two.
For almost all of it, right? I think there was
that's
like
right.
one.
Did you, so Back to the Future was your last episode, right?
I think so.
Because Gremlins was after that.
Yeah.
And I don't think you did Gremlins. Or maybe you did The Shining and then part of Back to the Future. I think Back to the Future may have been Ryan's.
I think Back to the Future was Ryan's. Yeah, I think that. I think
so. The Shining.
Shining was my last one.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And we shot Shining, I believe, at Backlot. And then I think we switched to production partners for Back to the Future. I think that really was because we went from Wayne to Gil. Was Gil shooting the new stuff you were on?
He shot, I feel like, a couple.
Gil Whitney?
But I think there was like one that like Wayne wasn't available for. I don't
Yeah,
really
Howard
remember.
Newstate shot Dementia 13.
Okay.
That's the only different.
Yeah.
But then when we went to Jaws and everything, I'm pretty sure that was Wayne until. Oh, that's what it was. I think Wayne's last episode was Back to the Future, and your last episode was Shining, and then Gremlins brought Gil in or something.
Yeah, something
If
like
I'm
that,
wrong,
yeah.
man, I feel bad. But
I mean, it's
maybe Wayne
not like it's
finished
been
after
10
years.
years.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that was doing the new ones. I know you were on Trick or Treat, Jaws, Blade Runner, Shining.
Yeah.
And maybe Halloween, maybe part of Halloween.
I'm trying to remember.
Halloween was the one before Back to the Future, so I can't remember if you did Halloween or not.
So I don't remember. Were you in the audience for a lot of these? Did you go see them?
I went to a bunch of them.
You went to Jaws,
I went to Jaws, yeah, and I went to. I think it was a decent number.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but a good number. Yeah.
Okay. And so you just saw how the audience reacted to your special effects. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was fun, and that's why, like, I know when you stepped down, it was like, so I felt like I had cheated you because bringing Ryan in, and I think Ryan was supposed to be temporary too, and like, I mean, he stayed till the end, and it was one of these things where I think that I felt like I had cheated you because we didn't know that we ever had the ability to do bigger films. So you did like 4 of them, or 5 of them, and I was like, man, we're just now starting to get to the good stuff, and I know you got like real busy, and so like, so it was a bummer because I'm like, I wish I could have taken his talent and put that toward better movies, because that's when looking back on the seasons, they're great effects, but the movies themselves like worked hand in hand with them, and once we went bigger, that was it. I mean, that was and then we kind of knew we were there until the end. I mean, because it's like you can't go backward.
Right, yeah.
But the third season, originally, the public domain third season would have been Scarlet Street by Fritz Lang, The Outlaw with Jane Russell, The Red House with Rory Calhoun. I mean, we had a list, but it just half the movies weren't even chillers. I mean, they were just Westerns and just, I mean, we would have had fun and no one would have shown up. That's sure. So it was either like change movies or die. But.
Well, we were still thinking about making it like Nite Owl, where chiller was only one night.
Yep.
And then the rest of the week could be a musical, a comedy, a drama, a war picture, a Western, could be anything. So the thought for the movies he just mentioned were so that we could start to have non-horror movies like we did on Channel 10, but the idea just didn't work out. And, well, the only movie that was sort of horror on that was Red House with Edward G. Robinson, and that was because it was one of the few movies where the theremin was used as part of the music score. I think it was Miklos Rosa who did the score for that, and it was a chilling score, and it was a suspenseful, eerie kind of movie for the first half because you thought something supernatural was happening in the woods that were in the movie, and then about halfway through you found out what the actual danger in the woods was, and it was a human who was just sort of like the babysitter to keep people out of the woods where apparently this red house
Sounds
was.
like a Scooby-Doo ending.
Yeah. Oh, no, the woods is where the red house was that Edward G. Robinson had killed his first wife or something like that.
And it was in black and white, right?
It was black and white, yeah.
The Red House.
It was a psychodrama. Edward G. Robinson produced it. It was, I think, one of only 2 films he produced.
Did that musician, I know Vidas just asked if that musician was the guy who did Ben-Hur.
Pardon?
He did Ben-Hur, didn't he? That same...
The score.
Miklos Rosa?
Yeah.
He did, tons of movies.
Yeah, nice.
He was quite. He was one of the old. The guy that scored the Warner Brothers and the 20th Century Fox pictures. Rosa started way back then in movies. Some of the movies from the late 40s and 50s. Okay. He did the music for.
Cool.
But this was the first time that he used the theremin, which had only been used, I think, once or twice before in a soundtrack. But the use of that really made the soundtrack spooky and kind of supernatural, and
right.
That was why it was considered one of the films we might show, because
right.
Yeah, it was a little bit out of the ordinary.
Yeah, and then when we got to the bigger films, it was more like, rather than doing just horror, I'm like, we can get away with cult, sci-fi, horror. Like, and if it was comedy like Wayne's World, Wayne's World still falls under this cult thing. So it that was pushing it. Like, that was about as far comedy as we can go.
So like when you guys started, like with Tobias, like with the process that you guys had that I was a part of later on. So the process was that you guys got together, you guys watched the movie together. You guys would pick your spots about where you were going to have the breaks. And then you would kind of just say, okay, in this scene, I can do this. Is that how it kind of worked?
A little bit. I would say the first few, I would say, Fritz picked some, Mike picked some. And then as I got kind of more involved in the process, then we would start to sit down and watch them all together.
Yeah.
And at that point, yeah, it was more about like, oh, we need a break about this far into the movie. And so we would watch it and then start to watch for what would be a good, interesting kind of break point.
Okay.
And then kind of one of us would say like, oh, I think we can do this. Or, Fritz might say like, oh, this would be a really cool place to do this. I have a fun fact about this. Or Mike might say, oh, this is the thing that I really want to see. Or I would come up with something. And so we would just kind of bounce that back and forth. And then it became, once we would kind of pick it, it would become a technical discussion about like, can we do it?
Yeah.
What can we do with it?
What was the movie we did where it was the animated open?
Spider Baby.
Spider Baby.
Yeah, that was. Yeah. I wish I remembered. He's in the credits, of course, but the guy that did the animated.
Oh yeah, I don't remember.
Like that made the pieces.
Yeah,
and then you took it and because I just watched that for the DVD set or the Blu-ray set, and it's weird because I could tell the mouth has like 3 mouths. It just kind of depends. But I'm looking at that going, man, this is such a cool, thing to have Fritz as a cartoon. And then we've got him now as Archer. We've got the Archer rig, the guys that did Archer.
But again, that was way, way ahead of what anybody else was doing, particularly on the local scene.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it got and it was the season 2 opener, so people were kind of like, what? A cartoon? It's really cool. That's the thing about season 2 is even if the movies weren't as strong as season 1 or as popular, like the effects definitely were twice as good. And I think that...
Wasn't Spider Baby the one where Lon Chaney takes the cover off the dinner.
Yeah, it's a
and
dinner
I'm the dinner.
Yeah.
On that. Yeah, that was again a terrific and a surprising effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to circle back what you were saying, Vidas, I think on the technical side of things, we would kind of look at it and say, like, this is where we want to break. And then it would be a discussion about, like, okay, is this a mouth replacement? Is this, at the time we were doing kind of the graphic interstitials too, where, it would be like the, purple background with just the cartoon owl. And we had some VOs. So some of them we didn't have a great place for a cool effect. So we would stick one of those. And then we would always look for kind of like a premiere effect, right? So there was like one really good effect that we had to get, and then there were a couple graphic ones, and then your intro, outro stuff. So it was kind of being thoughtful about that. But there were times that we were just like, yeah, I mean, he can pop up here, or he can walk in this frame, or we can do a mouse and that was it.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again,
Like, and Ron Maynard did the Nite Owl illustration, like the for the interstitial breaks.
Yep.
And then he assigned a color. So he'd be like, here's these two designs with the just purple or orange or whatever. And then so each episode in season 2 is color coded.
Yep.
And it looks really great when put together. Like I went back to your like design files for the artwork for season 2, where you had, instead of just having the color, you had this like sort of black aged look on like a layer on top, and that changes everything. I mean, it just makes it look so cool.
Well, the other thing we did for those breaks was, at first those were just going to be stills, and then I started animating kind of like the owl or different things that would happen on those graphics. Not a lot, but just like a little bit, like wave its arms a little bit, or they're just like different things to give it some motion, so we weren't just looking at a still graphic for a minute or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was neat. I mean, it definitely was. It was season 1 enhanced. I mean, it was a step up, and then and then for when we did Jaws and everything, it was like that was the moment where we stopped using any breaks that were just off.
Yeah,
where it was just like Fritz is going to be in all 7.
Right.
I don't know how we shot 18 episodes with no break, like month to month. I don't know how we did that. Like, that was insane. Like, because it was a year and a half straight of no repeats, all new episodes, no breaks.
Right.
Him in 7 breaks each episode. I mean, it was
right.
We'll never have. I mean, that was the biggest, craziest run.
But one of the things is, like, at Channel 10, we would never do something in the middle of a scene. The scene would always end, and then we would do the break. So a terrible thing. I was in D.C., and I was telling my younger brother about the original producers. Well, the station that was showing it, I told my brother, hey, you got to watch this, really terrific. The station that is showing it is obviously an automated station, and they put a break right in the middle of Springtime for Hitler.
Oh.
Oh, jeez.
And
the producers, yeah.
Yep. Just couldn't believe that. But at Channel 10, they were very conscientious about making sure a scene ended before we had any kind of a commercial break or a video with me. And we did the same thing when we were doing the 21st century version of it. We never cut into a scene in progress. It was always at the end of one.
You know, being in the audience for these things, and even though I like even wrote the episode, but you're kind of watching these scenes and you're like, ooh, is this the one? Because, okay, at the end of this scene, because you know you're not going to go in the middle of the scene.
Right,
right at the end, is this where Fritz is going to come in? Okay, no, it's going to be at the end of this one, you know, and there's this anticipation. And I think that you can feel it from the audience when it cuts to black, like, oh, okay, you know, here's the next Fritz scene, you know.
Well, that's the thing that what I did was I took the total runtime of the movie, and I would divide it by 6 because I know we had 6 breaks of the movie, or maybe I'd divide. Yeah, it needed to be 6 pieces, basically.
Right.
And so if Jaws is 2 hours and 5 minutes, it would each break would be like 17 minutes of movie, and then so what I would do is I'd burn discs that would go to black as if it was blacking out, where it went.
That's right.
For 30 seconds,
and we'd each
and then it would come back, and that's where when we would Tobias and I would link up and watch it with everyone or whatever. it was all about like, okay, here's the block of movie. We need to choose something from this block. So as we watched it, we would literally go there, or he would go here. We could do this and here, and then at the break, we were like, which one? You know, or something. Where it was like, gotta be something from there. And there were times where, as he was saying, there wasn't anything we thought we could do that was strong. So since we had the 2 graphic breaks for season 2 per episode, we would just kind of use a safety, like, okay, put one of those here.
Right,
We
sure,
didn't see anything that jumped out.
Yeah.
But it had to jump out, and it had to be obvious. But then it became fun to mess with the audience, where it's like if you're watching something that's an obvious thing, like if Raiders of the Lost Ark, if he's running from the rolling ball, well, obviously we're going to have Fritz run from the rolling ball. So we would go, well, no, let's not do that.
Right.
Have this thing happen over here, because then it would be more of a surprise.
You know, I remember when I first got on the project, like with Jaws, and Tobias was working on Jaws. And I remember having those first meetings, and it was like, okay, like I wasn't familiar with Nite Owl either, but I remember it was like, well, can we just do this? And you're like, oh yeah, we can do that. I'm like, really? Like we can do, well, and then suddenly it's like, from a creative standpoint, it becomes like,
of course we can dissolve Fritz in a million particles.
But it's like, well, I'm not doing it. It's for Tobias is doing it. I'll just write it.
Recall in Jaws, we had the thing where you put me in the boat with the guys when they were singing in the cabin, and
and that was what you were talking about.
The way you did
breaks.
it looked like I was in the original film.
And we kept them moving the whole time.
Yeah.
Because it was just a 40. I think it was long.
But that killed me, though.
46-second shot is what it was.
And and I wrote a longer piece than 46 seconds. So I but I remember being in the audience, and I remember being like, why, and then it was because like you guys had planned a shot for 46 seconds.
Yeah.
But I had written something
Otherwise,
that was longer
they
than
had
that.
To freeze.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think you told me that. I think you said for the integrity, the video won out, or the special effect won out over the writing.
As it should.
I was probably I was probably a jerk. Like, what? You want him to freeze? We can keep your minute and a half.
Yeah,
freeze.
so you're right. Yeah.
No, but what I was getting at was the film quality of me sitting with those three or four other guys looked like that was actually part of the original movie.
Right, sure.
Original movie.
Well, but that's the challenge, is like keeping you proportionate to the other people.
Yeah.
And then I think for that one, you created a shadow so that if it wouldn't have been like believable that Fritz's knee would have like knocked into Richard Dreyfuss, as long as it was cut off by the lighting or in shadow, your mind is not going to think, well, where would his knee? Wouldn't his knee be over? No.
Okay,
you're not looking at it.
So here's the other question for you, Tobias.
Yeah.
So how much is, when you're shooting these like outtakes, how much do you have to coordinate with the DP, with the director of photography?
So
That's a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I was on almost all, if not all, of the shot.
He was always on set.
You have
when
to
he
be
did.
So
there.
I was there, and I usually had
a reference,
like a reference. So we had a reference of like what the plate would be, basically the
Just like a
background, a
still,
still of it. Yeah. And so I could visually say like, okay, yeah, we need Fritz to turn 12 more degrees like this way, and we need a shadow on him, coming down on his left side. So we would do some of those things in studio to make it easier on the back end. But yeah, we basically had like an iPad or something and would hold it up and say, yeah, that's about right.
Okay. So then how much?
guessing.
No. So then, but then how much?
Now you know.
No, like how much? Like for or like how much room for error did you have? Like for example, let's take the scene in Jaws when you're sitting at the table. Now, what if you shot it wrong where Fritz is like a foot taller than these guys? You could shrink that down, right?
Oh yeah,
digitally, but
If the table was the cutoff, you could almost move whatever was too long here under the table, right? Or just like past that point.
Yeah, I mean, so we were always shooting. I think at some point we started shooting in 4K, so we had lots of room to shrink, and so yeah, sometimes we would shoot him a lot larger than we needed.
So you could shrink it down.
That we could do whatever with that footage.
Because it's easier to shrink down.
We did do a lot of like almost full head to toe sometimes when you knew you were going to use just torso, right? Or something where you're just like, well, just in case we need this much more.
Right.
Because like I know you weren't involved with this, but like you didn't do Raiders, right?
No.
Okay, so Raiders has got the shot with Fritz in the truck.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a great shot, but that one is like it's all angles where it's got to look like.
Yep.
Because if it doesn't look right,
Well, I'll tell you what Ryan did is he spent a week. There's a certain shake movement to that truck as they're driving, and he took, I think, 30-something seconds of footage, and frame by frame tracked the shake.
Oh wow!
And then had it repeat as a still. It like kept shaking, so you felt like they were moving and driving. And I mean, you were OCD, but what I love the thing about Ryan is like he's a lot like me, where it's like no one's gonna notice this, and I don't care.
Oh yeah, sure.
And
right,
it will spend like 2 weeks on something that which respectfully to you. You didn't have the time for. I mean, there's no way.
Well,
there's
kind of
no way.
Circling back to that whole thing that he did with the death character, like that is what made that shot. And Mike's just over here breaking glass.
Sorry about that. That was probably very loud to the listeners.
Yeah, I mean that's why Ryan was so great was on that the death shot with Cy, he had to be that meticulous in order for it to work.
Yeah.
And I think that was the great thing about this show. I feel like every time that we needed somebody who was able to do something very specific and really well, they were there, right? It's like bringing Vidas in to start writing some of these episodes, right? Like you brought a lot of research and a lot of like thoughtfulness to a lot of the episodes, and it was timed when we were starting to do these like bigger things, and so it felt time for something different. And
sure.
And that kind of came in. Same thing with Ryan, and I think to some degree, me when I came in and the couple episodes I directed, it was all timing. It just kind of like worked.
Yep. Well, and one thing about our first 2 seasons we haven't mentioned is Rusty Crooks' music that he would compose for each episode.
That's right.
And he would just give us like, here's 5 tracks I wrote. And they were all instrumentals, but it was up to us what episode we wanted to place them in.
Oh, okay.
Like there were times where I'd be like, okay, it's House on Haunted Hill. So he would record like ominous, creepy stuff, but he'd be like, here's 7 tracks and we used like 3 or 4 of them or whatever. But that's why and I know people are asking a lot about this fall. There's a vinyl record coming out of his score from seasons 1 and 2, and with Fritz's voice like peppered in between each track as a segue, and it's going to be a fun little like music from Nite Owl Theatre vinyl that Rusty will get showcased a bit, because I know like the new episodes we just use like John Williams or
right. Sure.
But that was a big thing to have. The first 2 seasons were completely us, like just
right.
it was
there was the special music that your friend did for our version of Metropolis.
Oh my God, that deserves a vinyl.
That score was better than that score was better than what the original producer.
What is
so? I mean, as I mentioned on other podcasts, like I collect film now. I collect 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter films. I haven't talked to you about this, but I have like prints of like movies, and I also have a guy. Let's just say he's not in the U.S., but he will make me prints, like 16 millimeter brand new struck prints on Kodak of any movie that I want. And so I've got, like Drive with Ryan Gosling at home. I've got Empire Records and things like that. And it's just beautiful to watch it print. But I thought about having Metropolis made, and if I had it made, I would use James's score. Because I'm like, it's so good. It's like when I hear the original score to Metropolis, and Rome Maynard, if you're listening, this is not a slam on the movie, but it's literally like this, like dun 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 dun. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like this movie to me is so moving and dark.
So the score this person made, was it for the full movie? Like,
I gave him the movie.
Oh wow!
I gave him the movie with the breaks, like not the breaks, but like where till it went to black. I gave him 6 chunks, and I was like, "You can create your own score to this." Basically, he gave me back 6 tracks that timed exactly the length of the film I gave him, and it's completely original. I mean, and it's great. He's a big Vangelis fan, so like it sounds like Blade Runner. It sounds. I mean,
it's really good.
And I mean, he timed stuff to where like when Frater like jumps and grabs the bell, all of a sudden in his score he's got bells going.
Oh, that's neat.
Right on the hits,
yeah,
and I'm
that's
like,
neat.
Holy crap!
That's great.
Yeah, it was.
Didn't he make a CD of that?
He did. No, we
Yeah.
had. There was a time where we actually like were on it. We like released stuff, you know. So the Metropolis had a 2 CD soundtrack that we would sell and all this kind of stuff. And now it's to the point where like, who buys a CD anymore? I mean,
Sure.
My last album like barely sold any CDs.
Right.
Almost sold out of the vinyls.
Right.
So it's just like I think that we're in a vinyl world now. So the music from seasons 1 and 2, well, like side A will be season 1, side B will be season 2. It won't be everything because there's you get like 22 minutes a side.
Right.
So, but I'm making a special mix just for vinyl, not the soundtracks we used to release, but this is like a special vinyl mix that has Fritz sort of segueing, like actual lifts from the episode itself of his voice, kind of hosting and going through. It's a really neat thing. It's like continuous tracks, like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then James's Metropolis score, I would love to have a vinyl of that, but it's very expensive to make vinyl, and so it just depends on if people want it and if they'll pre-order it.
Right.
Because that pre-order money is the only way to get a vinyl.
Sure.
Because it's crazy expensive. But yeah. Well, Tobias, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome to get to catch up, and slowly we're getting the gang back together for the 50th and bringing different people in. And
Are you going to be coming to any of the?
And thank you for all the great visuals you provided. Made the show
absolutely.
even better than what it was.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was some of the most fun that I had during that period because I was, heads down with work, and so this was at my playtime. So I looked forward to doing these probably more than anything during that period. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that. But it was definitely fun to kind of get back and reminisce with everyone and catch up. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
yeah, so happy 50th on the show, Fritz. That's crazy.
Thank you much. Thank you for listening to our podcast, and we'll see you next Friday. Same time, same Friday.
If not next Friday, the next time an episode airs, because you know how this works. See y'all.